Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to LeadersIn and LeadersIn Business. Robert Senior is running a major corporate. He is the CEO of Saatchi Saatchi Fallon Group, but he's also got a very strong entrepreneurial flair about him. In fact, in 1996, he set up a company called Fallon, which over time became one of the most recognized and admired advertising agencies here in the UK. In fact, Campaign magazine said that in 2006 he had won the Agency of the Year award, and The Independent said that he was the hottest name in Adland. So he certainly knows a thing or two about setting up an organization as well as running one. So in 2007, the company then came together with Saatchi Saatchi and Fallon to set up SSF Group, of which he became the CEO. He's done tremendous things since that time, and some of the most recognized adverts you'll have seen was under this man's leadership. And he has now got a very fancy job title, which is Chairman and CEO of Saatchi Saatchi Fallon Group, EMEA, and Chairman of Saatchi Saatchi Worldwide Creative Board. Essentially, he's right at the top of that organization. And so we would, without further ado, we were delighted to welcome Robert. Robert, welcome.
Thank you. Well, goodness me, thank you very much. I don't often get nervous, but after that. Now, I've never been to the London Stock Exchange before. I mean, I just assumed it was the sort of site of the scene of outrageous carnage, but it looks all quite calm and they all seem quite pleased with themselves, so hopefully they know what they're doing. I'm really pleased. Thank you for the opportunity to talk. I'm sort of not sure I got the best slot following Ronan. I thought that was magnificent. I have to tell you that from an advertising agency or a creative company standpoint, I should say, if I closed my eyes, and as I said this to Ronan afterwards, if I closed my eyes and just listened to what he was talking about and took away the noun of the actual industry, he might as well have been talking about ideas companies. And actually, maybe that's what indeed he is. The curator of experiences is pretty much how we would view ourselves, not just me and our companies, but I think the industry broadly. The theme, I mean, the thing about events like this is one feels obliged to write titles, and they're usually really rubbish, as is this one. So it's just something to spark off. But this notion of science of creativity, and the reason I use that is that, first of all, if I go back into science, Einstein defined creativity as the residue of time wasted. The residue of time wasted. So that's quite low down in the pecking order of the food chain of intellectual capital. But the boardroom, with many accountants, insist on treating marketing communications, many of them do, insist on treating it as a science, as a sort of very precise, but what will the ROI be? What will happen precisely? So we find ourselves on the receiving end of well, actually, I think the rubbish agencies then create some cod science to answer the question, but it's not a real answer to a very real question. And while that's happening in the boardroom, in the living room, I think, increasingly, our audiences are staring in utter bewilderment most of the time at the nonsense that's put their way. So I think marketing generally, at this sort of junction, is in a bit of a muddle. And whenever we get in a muddle, we do things like fix an away day, or, you know, have a brainstorm or something. And what we do is we have this impulse to plan the future. And the thing about the future is it's irrelevant. It's utterly irrelevant because I don't know. You know, what our audiences are demanding, and what Ronan brought to life very articulately, I thought, was we live in the age of now. Right here, right now. If something goes wrong, I'm going to stay up all night to fix it. Witness the anecdote a moment ago. And from a marketing, you know, trained people, you'd sort of say, well, we used to be in this starburst marketing era of new, now with added vitamins. You know, now it's new from such and such. And new is fantastic. It lasts about a second and a half, which is lovely. But really, what we're operating in now is, if you like, if there is an age, it's the age of now. And the age where it's 24/7, 365 days a year, channel agnostic, hyper convenient, impulse driven, instant everywhere, blah, blah, blah. There's examples absolutely everywhere. Whether it's the History Channel, you can stop and put your cursor on anything you see on screen and buy it immediately. In Dubai, there's a pizza company. I think this is bloody clever, actually. You go to the fridge, you've had a hard day at work, you're not quite sure what's in the fridge, you might make yourself a salad, but there's a fridge magnet, and if you push it, it automatically orders you a pizza and they deliver it. How cool is that? That's good. So in terms of fridge intervention strategy, I thought that was pretty excellent. There's a good example of the now. There's a stroller for middle-class mums who have an LCD screen on. They can watch films, they can charge up their mobiles, do some Blackberries, and walk their children, and be a good mum. I mean, there's just examples everywhere, and you're probably doing it while I'm talking across the screens. But if you were to dimensionalize it, you look at it and go, well, if it's from new to now, it's from grabbing people's attention to actually inviting participation through communication. I'm talking about marketing now and ideas. We used to inform, let's tell more information, means of information. It's not, it's a means of inspiring. It's a means of inspiring. We used to interrupt, we interact. The ROI, yes, of course it's the return on investment. Ultimately, this is a business proposition. But my ROI is what's the return on involvement? How involved are my audiences going to be? Because if they are, the chances are there's going to be a commercial return. We used to generate transactions. Now it's about creating movements, our audiences. And so we asked 3 really simple questions of the creative work, any creative work that we produce. The first is, honestly, do I want to see it again, experience it again? Really? Do I? Because I quite often find myself in meetings where there's a lot of box ticking going on, and there's an awful lot of stakeholders, and therefore a lot of criteria, and everyone's just so relieved to have got through the meeting. We've got something that everyone agrees on. And you could tell the meeting, the body language in the room is, let's just move on now. I don't want to see it again. It's like, it's just, and if that's how you feel in the boardroom, in the meeting room, you can be sure that's what will happen in the living room or on the screen or wherever with our audiences. So would our audiences really want to see it again? Would they want to share it? Would they honestly want to send it on? Or would they just bin it? And more than that, would they even want to improve it? Do muck around with it, mash it up, put a different soundtrack, play with it? Have I given the opportunity to play with it? Is it worth playing with it? So there's just 3 really, really simple questions. We spend, I think, 10%, we spend less than 10% of our time executing at the moment, and 90% of the time having blooming meetings and strategizing. I mean, what's the point in that? The only bit our audiences see is the execution. It's the only bit they see. They're not in the meetings. So however clever we are, and how fantastic presentations, wonderfully articulate, and it's really considered, if the execution is nonsense, we are dead. And so you go back to my observation about we're in a bit of a muddle and the bewilderment of our audiences, and you go, how on earth did that all happen? It staggers me. I think in the age of now, the paradigm's flipped, and the most time is spent on execution. It's spent on executing. Because we can, in today's world and platforms, we can change stuff. We can adapt stuff, move with the times. We can have an unfolding narrative in journalistic terms. But doing nothing, I mean, Rowan said earlier, I know exactly what my return is if we do nothing. It's that, okay? Doing something will always beat doing nothing. And that's kind of the spirit, if you like, I think, that we're in now. So when we do stuff, more often than not, I have to admit, we don't really know what's going to happen. Certainly was the case with this. the story behind that was it was an initiative by a creative team who got together with the brand manager, not even the marketing director. So it was a little initiative because they couldn't believe the sort of media hype going to lead up to the wedding. Who's going to be invited? What should we be wearing? Blah, blah, blah. And it was only online. So the investment was £120,000 production and online seeding. And it was just a bit of fun, really. It was just a bit of fun to take on this Life is for Sharing thought. 25 million YouTube views later, and it became the spine of that year's marketing strategy. It was an unfolding narrative. It could easily not have worked as well. I mean, easily. I think we got a bit lucky. The CEO at the time was asked what his KPIs and what he's proud of. And in fact, it was a highly effective campaign from a commercial standpoint, but his answer was great. It was a four-part answer. He goes, well, the first thing is we got a message from Princess Beatrice complaining that her legs looked a bit fat. There's a reason for that. The second one was the Archbishop of Canterbury, and this is true, the Archbishop of Canterbury on the Sunday, because that wedding was on the Friday, and the service that he would, in the sermon on his Sunday service, the following 2 days later, he praised that piece of film because he thought it brought great joy to the church, which I thought was lovely. Prince Harry put it on his Facebook page saying, with a message saying, a sign of things to come. And and then the favourite one is there's a group of people in Wisconsin, no apologies to our friends from North America in the room, but so a group of people in Wisconsin who actually thought that was the wedding, which I think is absolutely the best bit. The world we live in, I just want to frame a minute. Okay, so we're living in this old world of now. That's exciting. That's really energizing. But the reality is there's an awful lot of stuff that isn't energizing. And continuing with our American theme and how American colleagues and friends love an acronym, West Point Military Academy categorizes the world in terms of acronyms and what sort of state is the world in, which then goes to the White House and what have you. And the current acronym is VUCA. We live in a VUCA world, V being volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And that's from a geopolitical and military standpoint. And this came out just pre-Arab Spring, and you can work out all the whys and wherefores. But what was kind of interesting to me is one of our larger clients, Procter Gamble, the global CEO, Bob McDonnell, is an ex-Army SEAL, and he has adopted VUCA as his acronym to categorize the commercial world that he operates in, so from supply chain management to retailer power, media consumption, audience behavior, etc. And the reality is that this sort of thinking, and it's factually based, from a marketing standpoint, creates fear. It doesn't mean to, but that's the net output. It creates fear among the teams and the people around because it's all quite oppressive. And a lot of that is enhanced and accelerated by the news agenda, which seems intent on shining the white light of the world through the prism of fear and misery. And you can't blame them because on a factual basis, there's quite a lot to be fearful of and miserable about. I get that. So, you know, from a marketing standpoint, it is difficult. You find yourself on the back foot before you've even started the conversation in many categories, not all. And telecoms, I have to say, isn't one of those. But let's just take a broader view. And this notion of going, I made a cheap swipe at away days and brainstorms and stuff. But the problem with that is they tend to have 3-year plans. 3-year plans. Are you having a laugh? I think the most long-term plan I could possibly consider would be more like 3-month, 100-day plan. I mean, you know, General Eisenhower said, plans are useless, planning is everything. You've got to keep planning. You've got to keep moving. We're on that burning platform. But don't stick to a plan and go, oh, we can't do that. The plan says this. The world is changing all the time, which is why the now is all the more important. So if this is a characterization, continuing the theme of acronyms, just to play with it, the thing about creative companies, or creative industries, I should say, is that we are imbued with and often chastised for a ludicrous optimism. So if I were to say the VUCA world through the creative lens, I think it's vibrant, it's unreal. I can build a brand with no money in 2 days. It's possible. I can also get killed with no money in 2 days. Anything can happen today. If you're in the ideas business, how exciting is that? From complex to crazy, it's just crazy. And the creative instinct kind of likes that anarchy. And it's from ambiguous to astounding. That's just sort of playing with words. But the point is that if you're in the business of ideas, ideas, the impulse is for an idea to be a positive thought. It wouldn't be much of an election if the American election going, we're all fucked, excuse my language. That's not really you need something to believe in. Barack Obama's speech, if those of you who saw it, he talked about the force of hope, the caged animal of hope in everyone's soul, waiting to break open the door and keep reaching till we get there. I mean, he's a fantastic orator, but its ideas are inherently about positive energy. And strong, clever, smart, thought-leading brands, we've had a good example earlier, know that and play to that and deliver that actually in the sphere of their world. The Economist has this fantastic. I like The Economist as a brand. I think it's very funny. They have lots of really weird units. They've got the Economist Intelligence Unit. Imagine that. You go, where do you work? Oh, I work in the Economist Intelligence Unit. Where do you work? Oh, I work in the quite stupid department down the road. I mean, it's quite okay. The Economist Intelligence Unit does a summary at the end of every year, and actually this is from 2011, but I think it's as prevalent today, if not more so. And it asked this rhetorical question. This is directly lifted from his final chart. This chap, Robin Bew, editorial director, and he said, "Who will win the battle of ideas? West versus East, young versus old." It wasn't the battle of the economic battle or a military hardware battle. It's the battle of ideas. Ideas are more powerful than any other force that mankind has ever invented. And in fact, around the same time, the FT summarized in a slightly more, serrated, I would say, way, when it summarized it as, what is needed is nothing short of moving voters and markets from a mood of self-fulfilling pessimism to one of confidence in the future. So far, leaders have failed this task. Now, since they wrote that, the following European leaders have been fired. So let's just go through them. Romania, Netherlands, Spain, Italy, Greece, Slovakia, Portugal, Ireland, France, and Finland to date. They've all lost their jobs. There's no leadership. There is no leadership because there are very, very few ideas. The American election was fascinating for the lack of ideas. I think, I posit that view. This isn't a political thing, but ideas is what fuels it. It's what people follow, what people believe in, because it's how you package hope that tomorrow is worth waiting for, is worth fighting for, is worth working for, actually, which comes very closely back to purpose, which I'll probably would cover off in the Q&A, but purpose, not just company purpose, personal purpose. Who am I and why am I here and what do I want to do in my short time here, on this planet? Now, anyway, I'll come back to that later. If leadership starts with ideas, ideas are born of dreams. Martin Luther King did not say, I have a mission statement. He had a dream. And I'd invite you to ask yourself, if you look at JFK, had a dream to get man to the moon. Nelson Mandela, Steve Jobs, Gandhi, they all have or had dreams. What's yours? Have you got one? Because if you haven't, I really recommend working one out, because it defines everything, absolutely everything, I think. Now, vocabulary, from a communication standpoint, I think we're some of the worst communicators ever, marketeers, and agencies alike. In our communications that we put out there, it's fine-tuned, it's forensic. But when we talk to each other through email, the question earlier about, if you don't work together in the same room, doesn't that kind of dilute some of the communication and the inspiration or the energy? I thought was a good point, because I look at email, I've really wished that had never been invented. I honestly do. It encourages it brings out the lazy gene, I think, in humanity. But and hyperbole is my other pet hate in the way we talk to each other and about each other. So I have teams that come back regularly, probably twice a week, and they go, yeah, we had a great meeting. Yeah, we showed some great work. It was a great meeting. Oh, that's great. You had a great meeting and great work. That's pretty bloody impressive, isn't it? Alexander the Great, he was pretty great. He had an empire that lasted over 2 centuries. The Great Wall of China, that is great, because you could see it's a wall you could see from space. And you had a great meeting. What was it? It was an Ariel detergent tactical ad, was it? You had great work and a great meeting. What you mean is no one cried, everyone smiled, everyone was nice to each other, the biscuits were nice, and they bought the thing, whatever the thing you were selling. That is not great. That's admin. It's not great. And it kills me really, because the same thing happens with this idea of big ideas. We need a big idea. Hey, we've got a big idea for you. I got news just in. There is no such thing as a big idea. At inception, all ideas are tiny and brittle, and any moron can kill an idea at inception. It takes great vision, though. It takes great vision to spot an idea, to nurture an idea, and develop it together with whoever the parties are. Then it can become a big idea. But it takes work and belief. They are not born great. They are all tiny and they are all brittle. So it's a nonsense. And I mentioned earlier the unfolding narrative, this journalistic phrase. All great ideas or big ideas in today's world started out life over here somewhere and then went on some circuitous little journey. And only looking backwards could you conclude that it was all preordained and it was a stroke of genius, etc., etc. Everything that I've ever been involved in that was anywhere near classed as great, the drumming gorilla would be an example, which I'm not going to talk about, but the actual story behind it was nothing like all the chat afterwards. It was completely different. So everything starts brittle, and there's a spiritual leader in India by the name of Swami, and his second name I just simply can't pronounce, but he observes when he speaks that the true essence of science, going back to the theme of science and Einstein and what have you, the true essence of science is to never stop experimenting. It is not about the precision of an endpoint. It's a journey of experimentation, a Mobius strip. There is no destination. And in that respect, I think people in creative industries and marketing are very much scientists, because we should never stop experimenting and never stop. There is no endpoint for an idea or a campaign. I loved it when we used to produce a 30-second commercial, stick it on Coronation Street and go down the pub. It was fantastic. But those days are simply over. They've been over for a long time. This notion that ideas are in a state of permanent beta is never finished. So why would you stop and wait and perfect and hone it for another 3 months in post-production when your competition are out there eating your lunch? This thought is best expressed by the late and very, very great Steve Jobs, when he talked about connecting dots. You cannot connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect to your future, which I really love the sort of honesty of that. And this notion that, this notion that ideas happen and they drift off and they become this thing. They started with some sort of dream. And dreams tend to be emotional. They don't tend to be rational things. They tend to be emotional beliefs or desires. And I think our job in communications industry is actually to use the software of emotion, if you like, to deliver the hardware of results. And if you think of it like that and keep absolutely focused on that, there's quite a weight of responsibility to really touch people, not just sort of inform and talk at them or send stuff to them. I mean, if you type in, "I love Apple," Ronan used the love word quite a lot about brands. You love O2. I believe that. If you type in "I love Apple," right, to your Google search bar, you'll get, the last count, 3.27 million hits, right? That's fine. Type in "I love Citibank." You get 21,100. Type in "I love Dow Chemical." 1 hit. Probably from the bloke who wants to be the CEO. I don't know. Type in, and just to put it in context, type in "I love Satan." 293,000. Now, Dow Chemical and Citibank combined spent over $1 billion in advertising last year. Do you think it was money well spent? I'm just wondering about that. How are we feeling about that then? Viewed through that lens, probably not so clever, I would have thought. Yeah, we don't want people to love us. We just want to buy our products. Yeah, you see, one thing leads to the other. I don't know, which bit of that don't you get? I find it amazing that this notion that it's so self-evident that reason leads to conclusions. I can conclude that fact because I've got the facts and I've given it some reason, and there you go. Emotion leads to action. Think about the biggest decisions of action in your life thus far. It could be a partner, a lifetime partner, husband, wife. It could be a house. I think these are rational decisions. Or maybe a car.
Can you feel it? Can you feel the thrill of being alive? Neither can I. There is no alive in this town. Just pixels, pretense, and driver assist. it's real you're after, you gotta know where to look. Now that is real. No gimmicks. Just me, the car, the road, and feeling alive for the first time. Unfortunately, feeling is a capital offense around here. The thing with real is, once you've experienced it, there's no going back.
If the news agenda presents the world through the prism of fear and misery, I think ideas shines a light through a prism of hope and optimism, as I said earlier. I think it's a moral obligation, but it's perhaps more pertinently, it's a fiscal or commercial opportunity. And sometimes the big insight, you can get McKinsey's in if you want, you can do loads of brainstorms and stuff and spend billions on NPD, but sometimes the big insight is, you know what, we're just going to put a smile on people's face.
2011. Technological advances and social networks can now turn a night out into hell. Divorce. You're fired. Dirty old man. That's why Norte Beer presents Photo Blocker. The first beer cooler that detects when a photo is being taken and shines a flash, keeping you safe and sound.
Hello?
Hey, babe, how was the birthday party?
Yeah, it was boring.
Without Photo Blocker.
You're such a liar.
With Photo Blocker.
Aw, you didn't have any fun.
Without Photo Blocker.
You're disgusting.
With Photo Blocker.
And what do you guys get him?
Without Photo Blocker.
You jerk.
With Photo Blocker.
A t-shirt?
Without.
I hate you.
With.
I love you.
Rotate Photo Blocker. What happens in the club stays in the club.
In summary, we live in strange times. Consumers operate in the now, marketeers ignore that at their peril. A world characterized, if you like, by VUCA, bereft of leadership, and in many cases, ideas. A consumer that's willing to reward us if we offer ideas and positivity through the prism of hope and optimism. So maybe it's time to have a dream, be dreamers, let ideas unfold, and let's not kid ourselves about the big idea. Let's help build them together. And let's do it now. So if Einstein may have said that creativity is the residue of time wasted, he did also say that the greatest scientists are artists as well. So in this very scientific path to growth, which is what ultimately we are in the business of, I think the key is let's dare to actually move people.
It's not time to make a change. Just relax, take it easy. You're still young, that's your fault. There's so much you have to know. Find a girl, settle down. If you want, you can marry. Look at me, I am old, but I'm happy. I was once like you are now, and I know that it's not easy to be calm when you found something going on. But take your time, think a lot, Why think of everything you've got, for you will still be here tomorrow, but your dreams may not.
Thank you very much.
Robert, thank you for an inspiring presentation. You know the advertisement there for Photo Blocker, is that a real product and can we get some?
Well, the brief was, can we have a telly ad to say that our beer tastes better when it's cold? And somehow they got to, well, let's create and brand a beer cooler, but let's give it a twist.
Excellent.
And yes, you can get one. I've got 20.
Cut the recording was my mic. My wife might watch this. Let's. A lot of your presentation there was around hope, and we are still in this economic downturn. And we interviewed Andy Koslet, the CEO of IHG, and he said the CEO's job is to, yes, focus on the practicalities of cost cutting, but also you've got to give hope for a better day. But do you think that leaders, there's a tendency for them not to be communicating enough about the good, the hope for the better day and the dream?
Yes and no. I think there's many people at the top of organisations who have been known to have they build a reputation of mindless optimism, permanently saying everything's fantastic, isn't it beautiful, and it's a wonderful company, and it's a family, and it's all about values. And the talk is one thing, and the walk is something quite different, and that is as corrosive as saying nothing. So I think it's somewhere in the middle. I think it comes back to purpose. I think it comes back to a company that's very clear on its purpose and delivers against it. And part of purpose is to have a sense of an inspirational dream or a focus, to be clear on what your characters are, what characteristics or what forms the character, and what are the beliefs of the company. Because without that, it's just too easy to be, talk is too cheap, and we live in a soundbite world, and email is the worst offender of that. It's okay, I sent an email. Everyone will be fine now. Really? I'm not sure they even read it. You know, so it has to come from something real and be delivered through actions, would be my sense.
It's interesting you say that because we did some research on you and about how to operate in a downturn. And you said, probably, if I put my cynical hat on, you were saying that you've got to be bold, because people reading that might think it's got to be bold media spend. But you know, looking back over the last 3 to 4 years, and knock on wood, we're coming out of it next year, but looking back, what do you think one or two of the key lessons we can learn from this downturn going out that you've learned either at Saatchi or from observing some of your clients as to what some of the best ones have done?
Well, okay. You could start by saying that the impulse for many was to, you know, that awful expression, don't waste a good crisis. So let's use the crisis and let's, you know, share the pain and just go through an austerity package and cut costs. A sort of unbelievable kind of dismantling of brand equity or just equity, which, you know, like boiling a kettle, you boil it again and again 10 minutes later, and it doesn't take too many kilojoules, but if you leave it and it turns to ice, you've got a lot of investment to rebuild that thing. And it's the only thing you've got as a brand. Buildings dilapidate, people die. The brand is the thing that ultimately carries the value. So the companies that just said, right, well, because we can, we're going to strip all costs, there's a crisis, Lehman Brothers are down, this, that, and the other, and overcook that without any sense of, but what is our North Star, and what are we, you know, undoubtedly there's fat that can be cut, but then when you cut right into the bone, then you're causing sort of irreparable damage. So that'll be my first thing, is just judicious, pragmatic reductionism, knowing what it is ultimately, where is the value of the asset that you're caretaker of. You know, we're all temporary. We come and we go. You know, I think it's a gross irresponsibility to dismantle something that's taken a long time to build. And the other thing is, when I say bold in economic downturn, what I mean is, you know, the greatest. People say, oh, we don't want to do anything too risky. Well, I think The biggest risk is to spend the majority of the marketing budget, which tends to be media spend, on something deeply mediocre. I think that is the riskiest thing I've ever seen. I'd far sooner spend that money on something that may amaze, or it's going to jolt, and it may lose some people along the way. Some people may hate it, some people love it, but if they love it, something will happen. But if they don't notice it, that's guaranteed wastage. So that's what I meant about bold. I think maybe bold's the wrong word. I think it's maybe courage of your convictions.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned about experimentation. A lot of companies in a downturn don't focus on innovation because they're afraid that if they do something big or bold and it goes wrong, their jobs are on the line, and then they see unemployment stats, right? So it scares them. But creativity and innovation, in your opinion, how should that be done in corporations, well, downturn or upturn?
I think a lot of what we heard earlier, I think leaders have a responsibility to remember that life goes on. People still, the basic functions of life carry on, whatever the economy is doing. People laugh, they cry, they flirt, they get drunk, all the stuff that makes up life continues. And I think as a leader, you've got to remember, you're nothing without your people. We're in the talent business. Most industries are now, certainly in this country. We're in the talent business, that's it. That's all we've got. So, this thing about, hey, we've got to be more creative. Let's do a brainstorm. No, let's not do a brainstorm. It's not a machine, it doesn't on button. Let's create a culture where people feel that they feel inspired to and liberated to express themselves and have ideas, and reward those. I think it's a different, it's the law of unintended consequences. As soon as you put all that pressure on it, pressure cooker, we need ideas. It's literally like an industrial Hoover sucking the energy and hope out of the room. Because everyone's terrified. Because if we don't have ideas, we're all, it's all doomed. And it's really hard because when you get the numbers and you get the analysts down your neck, breathing down your neck, it's pretty hardcore. But yeah, sure, that's part of the responsibility. But you don't pass that on to your people because you won't get the creativity if you do.
It's interesting. Just a very practical question, if we can, about ideation. I've got a friend of mine who's a sort of creativity consultant, and he'll take a management team. They'll have one big problem, and they'll take them into the London Eye. There's pods in the London Eye, and they all have to come up with 10 ideas to the problem, or 10 solutions to the problem before they get off. Right. So, is that? Otherwise, they've got to keep on going around. And there's some very left-brain thinkers that find it very difficult. I mean, is that type of is that the best way, or is that a way to find?
I mean, it might be. It sounds like quite fun, actually. I mean, at least it breaks them out of the norm. But, there's no set way. I think it depends on where you are, who the people are. I mean, I have a weird region that you mentioned earlier, EMEA. There's nothing that unites the African continent with Norway, particularly. There's nothing that particularly unites Germany with France, actually.
You're the man to do it.
Yeah. So the way I manage or deal with my colleagues in Germany will be very different to, say, the Italians who I was with this morning. So, I don't think there's a set way.
Yeah. Cool. If we can go back now to where I was going to start, and that is actually with leadership. So if we can, Ronan talked a lot about it, and you've alluded to it as well, but if I can just ask you in a nutshell, your opinion. There's been books written on about it, articles written on about it, but if we can just get 2 minutes from you on what is great leadership.
Okay. Blimey. Well, I think, and it is kind of maybe overlapping a bit from earlier, but I think I could try and put it into 3 kind of bits. The first is what characterizes a great leader, I think, is the ability to listen. Really listen. We did a leadership session with Toyota, one of our clients, up at Manchester City in the Etihad Stadium, bizarrely, don't ask why. It was very interesting because they got a new CEO, and he's come from Barcelona, and Barcelona's a fantastic, very highly acclaimed football club, and he's struck me as a proper leader. And one of the people who joined us for 2 days was Patrick Vieira. And for those of you who don't follow football, Patrick Vieira is a French guy. He won the World Cup, he played for Arsenal for a long time, won the Premiership, I believe, at Arsenal. He certainly did at Manchester City, and he also played for Milan, one of the Milan teams under Jose Mourinho, where they won the Champions League. So he's won everything there is to win. He's won the lot. And he was there, and he's been trained as a management-y person, which is I thought, pretty enlightened, actually. He's annoyingly handsome. That's the only thing that's a bit really tall, handsome bloke. But anyway, just nice as well, which makes it worse. But he He was great. He was asked the question. He said, "Oh, Patrick, you've worked under some of the three of the greatest sports leaders, certainly in Europe: Jose Mourinho, Arsene Wenger, and Roberto Mancini now in Man City. What characterises those?" And he was right on it. He said, "Right, there's two things. One, and this is particular because they're very much media brands in a way. They're always in front of the media. The first is that the media persona of each of those three, and they were quite different in their way, is completely different to the man that he got to know as a player. He said they were brilliant, that they never let the media, they never gave them the key to their soul. They never, particularly Mourinho, who's, for those of you who don't know, very arrogant, very I'm the special one, I'm the guy. Apparently he's the opposite normally. But the pertinent to this point is, he said that all three are excellent listeners. They ask questions. They want to know, because all these kids have played football, they're all young. You know, what's your relationship like with your family? What are you scared of? Who's your best friend? When was the biggest trouble you were in? Who you're in love with at the moment? All that stuff. To listen, and then work out their place in the team. And he said the greatest listener was the one you least expect, which is Jose Mourinho. He would spend hours with each of them. And I think that, so listening as a leader, I think poor leaders tend to make a decision or talk based on the very last conversation they had. So they're constantly changing their view based on the last person they spoke to. And they don't do it, it's unwitting, it just happens. Whereas I think strong leaders make sure they talk to a lot of people and get lots of feedback. They listen. But the second element is to decide, the willingness to personally make a decision. Shimon Peres, previous Prime Minister of Israel, defined leadership as the courage to be alone. So this notion that you can get all this input, now go for a little walk, go and buy your own Starbucks or something. Just have a little moment, because you are going to decide, because you are accountable. Don't be taken by the latest thing. So to listen, then to decide, and then thirdly, to act. What I was saying earlier, execution. Do something. Don't prevaricate. Don't get stakeholder management meetings, and because of the diary, it's going to take 3 months. Act. I think those are three things that distinguish great leaders.
Yeah, we interviewed Max Clifford as well, and he was saying that one of the things he's noticed in all of the people that he's worked with, the very successful ones, is that they back their own judgment and their own instincts, and they don't get swayed. Because if you get swayed by a very persuasive wrong person, that's not a good thing, is it? Okay, if we can. You mentioned Steve Jobs. Oh, sorry, you mentioned Apple in your presentation. I still see them very much together, which may be a. But in your opinion, I don't know if you've read Steve Jobs' book for Walter Isaacson's book on his life. What do you think we can take away from Apple or Steve Jobs' success? And do you think that now Steve Jobs isn't no longer with us, that Apple's, are you a buy or a sell on that brand?
Good question. Well, I think what you can take from the book is, one, that he wasn't a terribly nice bloke, but there was some leadership things he had. Focus, one of them. Outrageous belief, this sort of unreasonable power of creativity in his mind. If it's a rounded edge, that is worth keep going until we can do that. One of the things I took from the book for his leadership style was the belief in this, what he referred to as this serendipity, magic sparked by serendipity. So when he rebuilt or had the second Pixar building built, he designed it so that the engineers, to get to the loo, had to go past the creative people, which meant that he thought if there was just chance encounters between the right-hand side and the left-hand side brain in an organisation, really cool shit happens. I don't know what it is, but it's going to be cool. And he really believed that. And I think there's a lot to be said for don't plan stuff. Back to your, hey, how do you turn the creative process into a science? Let it happen. Stuff will happen. The trick is to catch it, which is what I think he was good at. Yeah. I think he's obviously terrible at loads of other things. I mean, goodness. But you ask, am I a buy or seller of Apple? I just love Apple. I think it's brilliant. Yeah. I mean, I think Jonathan Ive is, I just hope he doesn't drink his own Kool-Aid. I don't know what will happen. I hope it carries on.
Yeah. As leaders, there are so many ideas that can come up internally or through customer insights. As you said, part of it is capturing it and then executing on it. Which ones how do you know which ones to actually execute? Is that then the leader's job, just to go through the bunch of ideas and work out which ones to back?
judgment,
Right.
listening to other people. Same thing. Listen, decide, act. The thing about decision making is you can always change course, but to set a course. But people without a rudderless team isn't a team. It's wasted energy. It's just wastage.
Yeah.
So you have to set a course, and even if underneath you go, oh, I don't know, Christ, I'll flick a coin, something, anything, it happens. But at least set a course, because everyone needs to know which direction we're going in. And no one has exclusive and divine right over right versus wrong. In most scenarios, it's a sort of spectrum of shades of grey. It's not black and white world, and so. I just think it's the responsibility in a room to go, right, at the end of it, go, right, this is what we're doing.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, because there's that image of the donkey with two haystacks either side. It couldn't decide which way to go, so it died. Could have gone either way. Talking about personal success and purpose now, you've talked about that, but from a personal perspective, you're in a very competitive industry, both from a sort of an agency perspective, but also the people in it. It's a very creative industry, so a lot of people want to work there, right? You've got to the top of your industry. What are some of the things that you do differently? Do you just work harder? Are you smarter?
No, I'm smarter. Well, first of all, I'm not at the top of my industry. Let's start there. I don't think there is a top. I mean, Nelson Mandela on his 90th birthday had a birthday party involving all the leaders of the time, and he did a little speech, and he asked any questions, and George Bush, the younger W, put his hand up and did hey, what next, Nelson? Was his question, and I got a laugh, and Nelson, deadpan, looked him straight in the eye and said, George, what next for me is what's next for everyone in this room. Climb a higher mountain.
Brilliant.
There is no top. It doesn't exist. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, I think what distinguishes people who go through and find themselves in leadership positions, they work really hard. I don't think there's any substitute for hard work. But I think we heard it earlier, that it has to start with a love of what you do, passion. A passion, commitment to the cause, understanding defining the cause, and then, so the purpose thing. What is the cause? I'm committed to it. And then the third one is you may not feel it now, but humility is this sense of, look, it's just me, I've just got a point of view, I could well be wrong. This sense of don't believe the hype. Spend time with spend time with understand every level of your organization and your customers. Because that's where the assistant comment earlier, that's where the insight and understanding will come from.
Talking about love of what you do, you love what you do, right? Because in The Independent, talking about the Cadbury Gorilla thing, I'm going to quote you on The Independent. It says, when advertising is done well, when advertising is done well, I can't think of a better business. And I quite enjoy the slightly maverick stance of taking on the naysayers, the tutters who say, you can't do gorilla drummers. Well, tut away, my friend, tut away at 9% increase in volume. Right?
I'd had quite a few coffees. I think there's got to be a sense of gladiatorial was used earlier. The word I quite like. You got to name your enemy. You got to choose an enemy, even if you don't really feel that way about them. I think any competitor needs to identify an enemy and focus in on them. It brings out the gladiator, and you're going to compete better that way. Sometimes I find myself, it's not a great habit this, but sometimes I find myself almost deliberately choreographing a sense of wild incandescence or rage or a sense of injustice in order to galvanize an energy force in a room to really accelerate out of whatever situation we're in. And I think I like, there's always people who say, advertising politicians and estate agents are generally not very high up in the food chain of careers, and people, I'm so sick of, advertising's dead, and well, yeah, it should be. Most of it should be, because most of it's rubbish. And it's overpopulated. There's over 300 agencies within the M25. The average margin is 3%. It's a nonsense. But you have to ask yourself, why is that? Is that if you take the Darwinian forces of commerce, it's not because the suppliers are idiots. It's because there's a lot of buyers out there buying stuff that they don't really know what they're buying. So they allow this industry to be wildly overpopulated and full of nonsense. But within that, advertising it's a terrible noun because we assume it's all old, but ideas like I said earlier, I think they're more valuable today than they've ever been because of the sheer ability to transmit them and communicate them and share them.
It's interesting you mentioned, final question from me before we get to the floor, it's interesting you mentioned about the element of hard work. Because there's books out there, like things like the 4-Hour Work Week. I don't know anyone that does a 4-hour work week. I haven't read the book. Maybe I should. But you know, where basically where it basically says you've got to focus on your strength and the most important things and delegate, outsource the rest. But the way I see it is you focus on your strengths and things you love to do. A, it's not really work, and B, if you love to do it, you wouldn't want to do it just for 4 hours a week, right? So as long as you love doing what you're doing, you don't mind working hard and later on into the evenings if you need to do so.
Yeah, I find the work-life thing interesting because it's such a blurred boundary for me, which sounds really sad and pathetic, it probably is, but I really love talking about, I love the strategic challenge, the intellectual challenge. I love narratives. I think each brand is like a political party. And I think discussion, debate, it's stimulating, it's interesting, and creative minds challenge you and kind of jolt you into seeing things slightly differently is very energizing. So in a good day at work, the day is as energizing as going out with mates down the pub and having a really good laugh. It's just as energizing. So, you know, I don't know, 4 hours, whatever. I just think if you love what you do, you throw yourself at it, you don't notice the time. Time drifts by. Yeah.
Good stuff. Thank you, sir, very much indeed. I can't really see, but thank you. Questions for Robert?
Hi there, Christina from News International. I'm thinking about the dinner party moment right now. You talk a lot about really good ideas, and I want to know what's the worst idea you've ever seen executed out there?
Well, I've seen some howlers.
What's your worst?
Yeah, crikey. Shit.
It doesn't have to be yours. It doesn't have to be your company.
Well, no, but it's better if it is, isn't it? Golly. There's so many. I can't really. When we set up Fallon, we had this little agency. It was like 6 of us, and we thought everything we did, it was so intense, the entrepreneurial thing, when there's very few of them. And we launched a lads mag. It was in the age when Loaded was like really popular and Nuts had just come out, and IPC, I think it was, launched a magazine that was designed. It was targeting blokes who just left the Loaded territory through age and were just moving on to slightly more serious life, the responsibilities of perhaps partners, marriage, or career, etc. And it was called Later. I think it lasted about 3 issues. It was, you know, who's going to admit to, I'm not a lad anymore, I'll buy that for the boring one. Anyway, we didn't think. So we launched it, and it was just terrible because it was like a rites of passage was the basic idea, that this was like a sign of and now you are now, my son, you've become a man type thing. And it was supposed to be done in a laddie way, though, so it was just horribly conceived, and it had some bloke in his underpants being passed through some ritual, being passed over being whacked on his arse with bits of it in some sort of stupid ritual, which we thought was so funny, and it turned out we were the only ones who thought it was funny. So you won't have seen it because it was on, it came and went in a flash, but no, we've done some terrible ones, and you learn more from the mistakes than you do from failures. But I tell you what, the willingness to have a go and not seeing failure as abject. I said earlier, you fail once, you know, it's like missing a flight in business. I always say, if you miss a flight for a meeting, when people miss a flight and it happens, you kind of go, it happens. Just, it only happens once. Because you do it once, you never miss a flight again, as I remember from when I did. So I think it's a bit like that with bad work.
Great question, thank you. Yes.
Hi, Dan Winter from Warner Brothers. I'm interested to know what makes a good client and how many do you have?
Well, the kind of rule of thumb is clients get the work they deserve and agencies get the clients they deserve. So they kind of find their métier, and it's sort of Darwinian in some strange way. I think what makes a great client, it sort of depends on, it's a very personal thing, I think. But to me, consistency and candor. So if you're gonna chastise, if you're gonna critique with ferocity, then applaud with equal volume. Make sure that it's equal and opposite forces. Because I can deal with anger, and if we've cocked something up, I think we deserve it. But that's fine as long as there's a quid pro quo. I think, the usual stuff really, it's what you'd expect of leaders. Consistency, sort of basic fairness. And I don't think, that cliche of when leaders are interviewing future potential leaders, they take them to a restaurant and just observe how they treat waiters. I think politeness. I just don't understand what's clever about rudeness. It's so demeaning. And I don't see the value in demeaning the very people who you're hoping will write an idea that will help you get promoted quicker. It seems slightly odd. So I think some basic, I'm quite into sort of people. I think decent people with a moral compass and a clear sense of purpose. And I really like the hardcore ones. The ones are really tough. But it's tough love.
Hi there, Liz Balder in HBR. I'm just curious how you recruit people, because you've got quite a sense of what the company is. So I'm curious about the culture, how you recruit, and then how do you retain that group of very creative people, which are hard to manage on that scale?
It's the single hardest task I think most companies have is recruiting. Having a disproportionate share of talent is a business strategy, certainly in our industry. And keeping them is as hard as getting them in the first place. And I wish there isn't a silver bullet. I mean, I'll answer your question. How do we recruit? For example, our graduate trainee scheme. We used to do the same thing everyone did, which was do thousands of interviews, do through the levels, bring it down, maybe do a day's workshop and ask them some challenges. They do a presentation, and then you choose a few. We stopped doing that years ago. Partly because what happens is the people who have the time to do those initial interviewing stages aren't necessarily the best judges of the heartbeat of the company, aren't necessarily the best judges of aren't the best cultural ambassadors, if we can put it like that. Not always. And the other thing is, in today's world, we don't need to do all that. Back to you can work from home and connect in and stuff. So what we did 3 years ago, as an example, we invited our candidates to set up a Facebook group, and we said we'd interview the top 20 of the most members that they were able to recruit. And the top 2 that we got, they declined to come in for an interview. Very beautiful, lovely, sweet, polite letters saying, I'm really sorry, but actually I've set up a business off the back of my Facebook group. The first was over 250,000 members this one got, which was My Secret London. And it was this girl come up with this idea of all the really good coffee shops in London you don't read about in Time Out or anywhere else, and the really grungy second-hand clothes shops, and the best place to get, records, books, blah, blah, blah. And she got approached by American cities to say, could you do My Secret Denver or My Secret San Diego or whatever it was? So she set up a business. The other one was, I can't remember the other, but the point is that using their social skills and nous and a bit of creativity, and they were set 3 or 4 challenges, and then we interviewed 5 or 6. So by the time they'd gone through that, they either really enjoyed the kind of the perk of it, if I can put it like that, or they'd think, well, this is a waste of time. It's much easier to do that one because I just answer a few questions while I do that. We go, fine, I think that's lovely. That's perfect kind of segregation. But once they're there, it's sort of in the air vent, and don't always get it right. And you know really quickly when you've got it wrong. That's the scary thing.
It's interesting, I went to your website and just for research, and on the research section it said, we are not currently hiring for graduates. However, if you're a particular genius at ideas, then please apply, or something like that. It's brilliant. Always room for grade A talent, right? We've got time for just 2 more questions.
Hi, Corinne Wilkins from News International. You mentioned earlier about sort of clients being risk adverse. Do you ever feel that any of your ideas or creativity are actually compromised by obviously clients playing it safe?
All the time. I mean, the most important intervention that I find myself doing is removing an idea from the table because it's been beaten up, or death by 1,000 cuts. Well, could we just have, or maybe if we just, and it would be really good if we could do, 4 or 5 rounds of that, and it's barely, its initial intent. And most ideas, it's in the ether. It's in the nuance of it's a piece of film grammar, and it's terrible to have people assess scripts. Since when was anyone ever good at assessing scripts? Much better at assessing a piece of film. We're much more. So if you start taking away the magic, and the best way of judging that is putting scripts out to directors And when directors, they all sort of suddenly say, "Oh, I'm a bit busy," you know that their job is to turn it into a piece of wonderful. In the case of film, at least, there quite often are times when the agency team are happy, the client team is happy. So I had one recently on Guinness, where I just rang up the senior client and said, "Are you loving this?" Because I'm not. I loved it then, and I'm really not loving it. I think it'd be fine, but I don't remember you saying fine. Could you do me a fine advert, please, or campaign? That was never the. I think we need to start again and be a little harder on ourselves with what the expectations are, because we've set too many criteria, and we've just diluted it. So I don't think it's not a criticism. It's just a natural instinct, an impulse to. Oh, what about this and what about? I do it all the time, and I have to. I get pushed back by my colleagues regularly, and just get out of the way and stop trying to, let the writers do the writing.
Hi, Sophie Maunder-Allen from VCCP. I'm interested by your 3 questions that you asked at the beginning. Do you want to experience it again? Do you want to share it? Do you want to improve it? When in the process have you found that is, and who to, is the best time to ask those questions? Does your creative brief have at the end of it and it needs to be a TV ad, or do you never put anything at the end of a creative brief now and always ask of your creatives and the rest of the people in those meetings to answer those 3 questions first and foremost, no matter what that looks like?
The latter. It's actually the only, when it comes to creative department, it's an internal thing before we present it to a client, because you get to the heart of the matter, and it's a simple one question. Do I want to share it? Would anyone want to share this? Because people only share stuff that they've never seen before, and that beguiles them, fascinates them, upsets them, makes them laugh, cry, think differently, something. It's an intervention. It's cause and effect. And so if I don't want to share it, I don't want to present it. And I don't care if it's on brief. Well, I do care if it's on brief, obviously, but I don't care. It's not a good enough reason to take something to a client in an ideal world. I mean, there's lovely. If only it was that simple and pure. But that is the criteria. Do I want to share it? Yes or no?
Thank you to you all for being here today. Honoured to have you here. We hope to see you at the next one. And please do fill in your evaluation forms if you possibly can. You'll be rewarded with drinks next door, so please do stick around for a drink. And just once more, I'd like to thank Ronan, who is still here. Ronan, thank you, and Robert, and we hope to see you at the next one. Thank you.